Hey boys and girls, Jim here. Let's talk a little bit about a subject that seems to get bantered around quite a lot, especially recently. While this may be one of my kind of rambling videos, I think this is going to spark some wonderful conversation. So definitely feel free to chime in with your comments down below. And another part of this is kind of a video response to my buddy Supa, and I will try to remember to link over to his video that kind of sparked this conversation. This is all about the classifications of knives, comparing custom with mid-tech. And that's really something that's been being discussed a lot more recently. You know, and I'm the kind of person that when it comes to classifying mid-tech, I really stick to what Ken Onion describes it as, because he's the guy that coined the phrase. You know, he had gotten to a point where he could never possibly ever make enough knives for the demand that he had, and most good quality makers have gotten to that point at some point, and he just realized, hey, you know what, I don't have to do every single solitary little thing on this knife in order to make a good quality product. I can, you know, send out for my heat treating. I can have, you know, my surface grinding done, you know, out of the building and stuff like that, or have other people do it to my specs, get the stuff back, hand fit it, make it, you know, make it mine, and still give somebody a good quality product that I could put my name on, but it takes me a fifth of the time to do it, and I can produce, you know, a hell of a lot more. But the problem is the lines have gotten blurred tremendously over the years. And mid-tech is not the same mid-tech, I think, that we had become accustomed to. Just the same way that custom, I don't believe, is the same way that you would have designated it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. So let's start there. Let's start by talking about handmade customs. Now, what I'm going to do here is, the reason why this is clear for me is because I don't just use the three basic terms: custom, mid-tech, and production. Because at this point, those are so vague of a description, except for production. Production, pretty simple. But because those lines have been blurred, because technology has advanced to a degree where so many manufacturers, so many makers are producing custom knives with the aid of, as Supa puts them, intelligent machines. Again, it really blurs that line. Is it really a mid-tech, or is it a custom because they used a CNC or a water jet? So I don't consider that custom. Do you, Bill? Well, no, Bob. Hell no, I don't. It gets really, really difficult. So what I do is I have a 5-category classification that I use instead of just the 3. And the first deviation from the norm is going to be, I split up custom into 2 categories. I have hand-built custom, and then I have custom. So we're going to look at both. And I'm going to bring out a few examples here. And I know some people are going to balk at that third choice in particular. We'll get to that in a moment. So how do I define these? Okay, handmade custom. That will be built by hand using basic powered tools. The knife will be built specifically for that one individual customer, or maybe it could be a small run, but it's tailored to that individual customer and what their requests are. And it's done in a unique fashion by the maker whose name is on the knife, and you have zero outsourcing. So I use my Unihard 2 for an example. Everything that Yun does is handmade, period. That's just the way it is. Now, when I talk about handmade, what I have to kind of, I guess, add a caveat to that. Handmade custom in today's world is not the same as it was 30 years ago. They're still going to have to use powered machines. They're still going to use their grinders. They're still going to use, you know, drill presses and things like that. And of course they did back then. In the old days, though, go back 30 years, it really was a time where you could call up or contact in some fashion a custom knife maker, let's say with somebody like Jimmy Lyle or Gil Hibben, and say, hey, I really want to get a knife made. Here's kind of what I've got in my mind. Can you make it? And they would say yes or no, and then they would make you whatever you wanted. Now, in this day and age, it's impractical. No maker can tool up to make a completely one-off custom knife for everybody. So you're going to be picking from a certain set of models or molds that they have created within their lines. You know, there's very few exceptions to that. One exception that I really have to make is Elliot at Ferrum Forge. You know, he does go back to something that we don't really talk about very often. You know, when he began, he was forging his own steel, for God's sake. How many guys do you know that are really doing that in this day and age? I mean, really, almost nobody. You know, you can look at guys like Mick Strider, who does forge his own Damascus, but he's not out there forging every blade steel that he uses on every knife. So it's very rare to hear that. So you can actually call up Elliot and say, dude, I have a hand sketch. It looks like a 5-year-old on crack drew it, but maybe you can make something out of that. And he will take that sketch. And if there's a way to make those parts work together and represent something close to what you have drawn with your infantile art skills, he will do that. He will make you a complete one-off knife. Yoon is as close as you're going to get to that. He won't make you a one-off in that sense. He has certain models that you can choose from, and then you can just customize it almost endlessly. You know, in this case, you know, you've got the silver twill, you've got the carbon fiber, titanium on this side, flamed, anodized dots, yada, yada, yada. Another indication to be able to tell between a handmade custom and a custom is the fact that you call up Yoon and say, I want a knife. And he says, okay, it's a 2-year wait now. If you were the very next in line and he emails you and says, okay, I'm gathering all your components right now. You're the next on my list. I need your deposit. You're a good month to 2 months away from seeing your knife at that point. And that's when you know you're getting into a step above regular custom. So everything here was done by hand. He's not outsourcing anything. His name is on the company name or on the knife or however you want to say that. His name is on the knife. He's the only person doing the work. He is a one-man gig. And everything is completely hand-fitted, hand-formed, everything by hand. So that to me is a different classification. Then we go into regular custom. Some people may want to argue that a dyer wear is a mid-tech. You can argue all you want. Fact of the matter is, it's a custom. And by this definition, is built by hand as much as possible. The other part of the definition is that it's built by hand as much as possible and only by the maker whose name is on the knife. It is made to order or made in some sort of small batches where there's some exclusivity. And all fitting and assembly is done by hand. Now, that's obviously going to be different than mid-tech, you know, because they're not made to order. You can specify a part here and there. They're not going to be done by the maker whose name is on the blade. So there's your big difference. And that's why you would consider the dyer wear a custom and not a mid-tech. One guy working on it, period. And you can do whatever you want. If you look at his option list and go, you know what? I'd rather have a mirror polished blade, and I'd rather have a green anodized titanium frame, and I want my carbon fiber matte instead of polished, or polished instead of matte, or whatever. Those things will be done for you at a price. So that's where I just call it straight out custom. It can be made to order for you. It's done by that one person who's credited with either owning the company or whatever it is. You know, because you look at Dyerware, and his name isn't obviously Dyerware. Yuna is Yuna. Oh, excuse me, is Yoon. So just to be clear on that, it's that one guy that's doing that. And that's where I always argue the point on Dave Curtis and the F3, or the Nano, or on the Cruise, or whatever the model may be. Some people may want to argue it, and they go, well, this is a mid-tech, because the frame's water jetted, and then this, and then that. It doesn't matter. The process at this point is not what's up for interpretation. When you want to break out custom down to mid-tech, you have to look at exactly what Ken Onion's definition was, the outsourcing. Dave is a one-man operation. When you order, let's say it's an F3 like this, Every component of this knife was touched by Dave and Dave only, period. He ground the blade, he stonewashed the blade, he sharpened the blade. That pivot was made by him. The lockup was checked and assured by him. All the hand fitting was done by him. Oh, but he water jets the titanium. Well, yeah, Dave happens to own a water jet company. He's the one writing the code. He's the one punching everything in. He's the one hitting the go button. He's the one doing all the hand finishing afterwards. So I consider it a custom because, again, it falls into that. It's built by hand as much as possible, only by that one guy. It can be made to order. Mine was really, I think, the first to come out of his shop in a non-standard way. I just called him up and said, I'd really like mine to be different than everybody else's. So we did the anodized hardware, and it came out great. We've seen plenty more coming out with different little touches here and there afterwards. But mine, I think, was the first that he had done anything custom on, at least on this particular series. So that, again, qualifies it as a custom because it can be made to order. You guys know he made that 4-inch F3 for me, that one-off with the carbon fiber and the mirror polish components and whatnot. Complete custom. There's no way that that can be argued. So I love to use that for an example. Okay, so now we've got handmade custom and custom out of the way. Now you would assume I'm going to go to midtech, but I'm not. I'm going to go to semi-custom. And the glimpse really falls into that more so than the bodega. And I love this one because it's a gray area, and I'll discuss why. So what do I consider semi-custom, and why is that different than midtech? Semi-custom, machines such as a CNC or water jet, any technology that can be used to create those components, they're going to use those. But after that, everything will be finished by hand, once again, by the maker whose name is on the knife. Not being sent out to anyone else, and not utilizing any shop help. All work is done on the premises. Nothing is outsourced. They're only done in small batches or in complete one-offs, and they can still be offered made to order. Well, the glimpse certainly fell into that. At some point, Todd Begg's hands touched this knife, period. It may have just been for the final edge, but at some point, his hands touched this knife. They could have been made to order. You could say, hey, I want this, 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 or this. That's my definition, and that's where I feel there's a difference between custom and midtech. I think there's something in the middle there. Because again, at some point his hands touch this. And I think at some point you could almost consider hinderers in that way, because Rick makes the claim that every XM that leaves his shop, he does the final grind on it. He does the final sharpening. Cool. All right, now Greg Medford. Now here's one that kind of falls in the middle for me. Greg will tell you his knives are custom. Many of his customers will tell you his knives are custom. And they are to some degree. They can be made to order. You could say, I want a Praetorian, I want a drop point, even though it's not listed in your catalog. I want you to make it look like a freaking zebra on this side, and I want it to look like a cheetah on this side, and I want you to polish this and brush this and he'll do all those wonderful things for you. So in that way, he leans toward custom, or at least semi-custom. You know, we know that they're using a CNC machine to cut out the titanium frames. But now here's where he starts going toward midtech, because, yes, he is heat treating in-house, by the way. That's one thing I should mention, that it keeps him in that semi-custom to custom. You know, but he's surface grinding is being done outsourced, as far as I know. And then here's the other thing. My knife is different because this particular one was built by Greg, but you order a regular Praetorian. My next Praetorian that comes in, regular old Praetorian tie. Greg will probably never touch that knife. I don't know. We've talked about doing the custom things that we're doing, so yes, at some point he will. But just ordering a regular custom Praetorian, you don't know if Greg Medford himself is going to touch that knife. So that takes it out of custom and semi-custom, because at that point, he's using his trained team as employed on the premises to work on that knife. Now, from what I understand, he does check all the knives for the lockup to make sure, nothing's loose or anything like that. So there is extra special attention being paid, and you would say the same thing maybe for Chris Reeve, because Chris Reeve, most of the Sebenzas that leave his shop, and Menandis and Umnamzans, a lot of them he is inspecting himself. But again, not all of them. You don't know if you're getting one that ever passed through his hands or not. So there are a couple that really fall into a gray area. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the classification system. It just means things have evolved and things have changed, and everyone's having to adapt to this business at some point. All right, now we get to straight on midtechs. Almost said medtechs. There you go, Greg. There's a new term. You can just call your knife medtechs. People will love that. All right, let's get these knives out of the way. All right, so now we get to midtech, and we know that the bodega certainly falls within that. How do I classify it? Use of any and all technology or machines to create the components for larger production than what you could have done by hand. So there's no way that Todd Begg could make enough bodegas to meet the demand. He probably sells, and I have no idea what his sales numbers are, I'm just using a number. He probably sells, 5,000 knives a year. There's no way, there's not enough time in a day for one maker, the maker whose name is on the knife, could hand build 5,000 knives in a year. There's just not enough time in the day, period. So it's going to have to be a mid-tech at that point. To further with the definition, outsourcing of some basic components or processes such as surface grinding, heat treating, CNC, water jet, that's going to take place. But now to keep it mid-tech and not production, all fitting and assembly is performed by either the maker himself or his trained team employed on the premises. And that really starts letting you realize the difference in quality levels between a mid-tech and a production knife. You are going to get hand fitting, and that is so important. You're going to get that hand inspection. That's so important. Not everything is coming off of a machine. Human hands will have come in contact with this knife. Was it Todd himself? No. Was it somebody that he or someone trusted in his shop has trained to perform at an acceptable level? Yes. So to me, is this worth $850, which is what they charge for a G10 bodega? Absolutely. Do I think it's that much better than a $300 or $200 production, let's say, Benchmade or Spyderco? Absolutely. The quality of the components, the design, the intricacy in which it was manufactured, the hand fitting, the smoothness of everything, the the rock solid lockup, the fact that I have flipped this thing probably 20,000 times and the lock geometry has not changed a single bit. It still locks up in the exact same place it did last year when I bought it. All of these little things, the quality is there, exhibited in a mid-tech. This is as close as you're going to get to a Todd Begg custom. Does he take orders? Yeah, you could get on his list. You're on a 6-year wait. Good luck. You might not even be into knives in 6 years, or you may not even like the style of knife in 6 years. Who the hell knows? Now, we get to production, and production's simple. We all get production. We all understand that. Here's a great example of a really good quality production knife, Spyderco Tough. Production does not mean garbage. Does not mean cheap components. Here we've got the same titanium that's being used on this, $900 bodega. You got 3V steel, built very, 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 very thickly too. It's got great lockup. Everything about this knife is utterly fantastic. But it's a mass-produced item. These are made in small batches, and everything from this level and up, small batches. These are made in mass production. The knife that you get is the same knife that your buddy got, and his buddy got, and their buddy got. It's the same knife. You can't order anything special on this. Going back to mid-tech, depending on the maker, yes, you can usually ask for little changes. If I said, hey, Todd, I know you guys don't ever offer it, but I know purple G10 exists. Will you make me one in purple G10? Yeah, it's going to take you longer, but I've talked to Mattia about things like that. And sure, they're happy to do it if it's within the scope of, the materials they're able to obtain. They're happy to do it for you in many cases, not always. Don't go run to Todd and go, oh, Jim Skelton said no, 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 no. But it is a possibility. And with most midtechs, you can usually ask for small little options. With a production, you're buying what they make. You can't call up Spyderco and go, oh man, I really love that tough, but I really wish you'd make that titanium side gold anodized and a mirror polished pocket clip. They're going to go, sorry, we make it one way and this is the way it's made, period. You either buy this or don't buy it, or buy it and send it out to somebody that will pimp it for you. And then you can do whatever the hell you want. So, production is just going to mean it's mass produced. It's all machine made in order to make large volumes of units. There's no options for anything to be made, to order for the customer. So I use a 5-category system. And I think that makes it easier for me to make the delineation between all of the different steps involved. And yeah, there's still going to be crossovers. There's still going to be a little bit of a gray area like we discussed with the Praetorian. But I think it's a little bit easier to understand. The other thing is, a lot of times we just overthink this stuff. And I think sometimes people put too much emphasis on labels. You know what? I don't care if this is semi-custom, mid-tech, or custom. I love this knife. Same goes for this. I know this is straight up mid-tech. It doesn't mean it's any less quality than a custom. Matter of fact, I've handled customs that cost me a lot more money that were not as nicely made and did not perform as well as that mid-tech. Does it bother me that this can't be classified totally as a handmade custom, but only a regular custom? No, because there's not that big of a difference between the two. But when I'm going to start spending really, really big money, or I'm being told I have to wait an excessive amount of time, that's where I want to know the difference. Am I getting a custom or am I getting a handmade custom? Such as the Dyerware. It's a 2-year wait if you can get on their list. Otherwise, you're going to pay secondary market prices. These things are hovering around $2,000 at this point now. The one done up like mine would have cost you around $700 or so, ordering direct. I wouldn't pay $2,000 for this. And if I was told I had to wait 2 years and pay, I don't know, $1,000 for it, I'd want it to be a handmade custom and not just a quote-unquote run-of-the-mill custom. So anyway, that's the way that I break them out. Maybe you agree with some of it, maybe you don't. Maybe you think that's an oversimplification, or maybe you think I'm making it too confusing. But that's the way I justify it to myself and how I break things down. And I think it makes things crystal clear for me. So when somebody goes, well, it's kind of hard to tell if you want to call that a production or a mid-tech, pretty damn simple to me. There's a very clear definition there. Well, I don't know, man. I don't know if I consider that a mid-tech or a custom. I think there's some very clear lines between the two. And by using the classifications that I do, it just makes it easier for me to figure out what the hell it is I'm buying. So anyway, I'd love to hear your comments and your opinions down below. Shoot them out to me. Thanks.